The morning sun barely touched the tall windows of Ravencrest Palace when Captain Marcus Aldridge received the strangest order of his 20-year career. The head of royal security, Lord Pemberton, handed him a sealed letter with trembling hands and refused to meet his eyes. Marcus knew something was terribly wrong. The letter contained just 3 lines written in the Queen Consort's own handwriting, requesting his immediate presence in her private chambers at exactly midnight. No guards, no witnesses, complete secrecy. Marcus had served the royal family since he was 18 years old. He had protected 3 generations of royals, fought off assassination attempts, and kept countless secrets. But this was different. The Queen Consort, Lady Helena, had been married to King Edward for 15 years and rarely spoke directly to the guards. She was known for her grace, her charitable work, and her devotion to the kingdom. Why would she summon him alone to her chambers in the middle of the night? Throughout the day, Marcus tried to focus on his regular duties, but his mind kept wandering back to the mysterious letter. He watched Lady Helena during the afternoon garden party, searching for any clue in her behavior. She smiled at the guests, laughed at the right moments, and played the perfect royal consort. But Marcus noticed something others might have missed. Her hands shook slightly when she lifted her teacup. Her eyes darted toward the palace entrance every few minutes. She was afraid of something. As midnight approached, Marcus made his way through the silent corridors of the palace. The thick carpets muffled his footsteps. Ancient portraits of past kings and queens seemed to watch him with knowing eyes. He had walked these halls thousands of times, but tonight they felt different, almost threatening. The shadows seemed darker, the silence heavier. When he reached the Queen Consort's chambers, he paused outside the ornate door. His hand hovered over the golden handle. Once he entered, there would be no turning back. He knocked 3 times softly. The door opened immediately, as if Lady Helena had been waiting right behind it. She pulled him inside quickly and locked the door behind them. The room was dimly lit by a single candle. Heavy curtains covered all the windows. Marcus had never seen the Queen Consort like this. Her usually perfect hair hung loose around her shoulders. She wore a simple white nightgown instead of her royal robes. Most striking were her eyes, red and swollen from crying. "Captain Aldridge," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Thank you for coming. I know this is highly unusual, but I had no one else to turn to. What I'm about to tell you could destroy the kingdom." Marcus felt his heart racing. In all his years of service, he had never seen genuine fear in a royal's eyes until now. Lady Helena led him to a small sitting area away from the door. She kept glancing at the walls as if worried someone might be listening. Marcus knew the palace had secret passages, old tunnels built centuries ago for escape during sieges. Anyone could be watching from behind those ancient stones. 3 months ago, Lady Helena began, her hands twisting a handkerchief nervously, I discovered something about my marriage to King Edward. Something that changes everything we thought we knew about the royal family. She stood and walked to a large painting on the wall, a portrait of her wedding day. With shaking hands, she pushed the frame aside, revealing a small safe hidden behind it. She pulled out a wooden box, old and worn, with strange symbols carved into its surface. Marcus recognized those symbols from his military training in ancient history. They were from a language that hadn't been used in over 300 years. This box was given to me by the king's mother, Queen Dowager Margaret, on her deathbed, Lady Helena explained. She made me promise not to open it until I felt my life or the kingdom was in danger. 2 weeks ago, I received a threatening letter. Someone knows what is inside this box. Someone is trying to blackmail me. Marcus watched as she opened the box with a small key she wore around her neck. Inside were old documents, yellowed with age, and a single piece of jewelry. A ring with a ruby so dark it looked almost black. Lady Helena handed him one of the documents. The paper felt fragile in his hands, as if it might crumble at any moment. He began to read, and with each line his blood ran colder. The document was a marriage certificate dated 30 years ago. It showed that King Edward had been married before, years before his official coronation and his marriage to Lady Helena. The bride's name was Isabella Thornwood, a commoner from a small village in the north. According to the document, they had married in secret when Edward was still a young prince studying abroad. The marriage had been witnessed by a priest and 2 villagers, all of whom signed their names at the bottom of the certificate. "This cannot be real," Marcus said, though his professional instincts told him the document was genuine. The ink, the paper, the official seals, everything looked authentic. "There is more," Lady Helena said, pulling out another document. "Isabella Thornwood did not die childless, as the royal records claim. She gave birth to a son before she passed away. That son would now be 28 years old. If this marriage was legal, if it was never properly annulled, then King Edward's marriage to me is invalid. The children I have given him have no claim to the throne." Marcus felt the weight of this revelation crushing down on him. Lady Helena had 3 children with King Edward, the eldest being Princess Charlotte, who was set to become queen one day. If this secret marriage was real and legally binding, it meant the entire royal succession was built on a lie. The true heir to the throne was a man no one knew existed, living somewhere in the kingdom as a commoner. "Who sent you the threatening letter?" Marcus asked, his mind already working through the implications. "I do not know," Lady Helena replied. The letter had no signature. It simply said that they knew about Edward's first wife, and that they would reveal everything unless I paid them a fortune in gold. "But it is not about the money, Captain. Someone has been watching me, following me. I feel eyes on me constantly. Yesterday I found my private study ransacked, though nothing seemed to be taken. They are looking for this box." Marcus stood and walked to the window, carefully pulling back the curtain just enough to scan the courtyard below. The palace grounds were quiet, with only the regular patrol guards visible. But he knew there were countless hiding places in the old palace. Secret rooms, forgotten passages, places where someone could hide for weeks without being discovered. "We need to verify if this marriage was ever legally dissolved," Marcus said. "If it was, then you and your children are safe. But if Edward never properly ended his first marriage, then you are right. This secret could tear the kingdom apart." Lady Helena wiped tears from her eyes. "I have loved Edward for 15 years. I have given him children, supported his reign, done everything a queen consort should do. But now I learn that I might have been nothing more than his mistress all along. My children might be considered illegitimate. How can I face them? How can I tell Princess Charlotte that she might never be queen?" The candle flickered, casting dancing shadows across the room. Marcus made a decision then, one that would change his life forever. He would help Lady Helena uncover the truth about King Edward's past. But he knew they had to be careful. If the wrong people found out what they were investigating, both their lives would be in danger. Someone had already threatened the queen consort, someone who knew about the secret marriage and was willing to use it for their own purposes. "Tomorrow," Marcus said quietly, "I will begin a private investigation. I will travel north to the village where Edward and Isabella were married. I will find out if there are any records, any witnesses still alive who remember that day. But Lady Helena, you must promise me something. Trust no one in the palace. Not the other guards, not the advisors, not even the king himself until we know the full truth." Lady Helena nodded, her face pale but determined. She carefully returned the documents and the ring to the wooden box and locked it away behind the painting. As Marcus prepared to leave her chambers, she grabbed his arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Captain," she whispered urgently, "there is one more thing you should know. The ring in that box, the one with the dark ruby, it bears the royal seal. But it is not the seal of our kingdom. It belongs to the throne of Valdoria, our greatest enemy. Isabella Thornwood was not just a commoner. I believe she was a spy." Marcus left the queen consort's chambers just before dawn, his mind racing with everything he had learned. A spy. Isabella Thornwood had been a spy from Valdoria, the kingdom's oldest enemy. This changed everything. If King Edward had unknowingly married an enemy agent, the implications went far beyond succession rights. It meant the royal family had been compromised 30 years ago. And who knew what secrets Isabella might have passed to Valdoria during her brief marriage to the prince. He returned to his quarters and pulled out an old leather journal where he kept notes on every assignment. He began writing down everything Lady Helena had told him, using a code only he understood. The marriage certificate, the ring with the Valdorian seal, the mysterious son who would now be 28 years old, the blackmail letter. As he wrote, a pattern began to emerge. Someone with deep knowledge of royal history was behind this. Someone who had access to information that should have been buried forever. Marcus decided to start his investigation closer to home before traveling north. He needed to visit the royal archives, a massive library beneath the palace that contained centuries of records. Few people had access to the archives, and even fewer knew about the secret section where the most sensitive documents were kept. Marcus had been there once, 15 years ago, when investigating a threat against the previous king. He remembered the endless rows of shelves, the smell of old paper and dust, and the eerie silence that filled the underground chambers. The head archivist was an elderly man named Brother Thomas, a monk who had dedicated his entire life to preserving royal history. Marcus found him early that morning, hunched over an ancient manuscript, his magnifying glass catching the light from oil lamps. Brother Thomas looked up with rheumy eyes that still held sharp intelligence. "Captain Aldridge," the old monk said, surprised. "It has been many years since you graced these dusty halls. What brings you to the archives at such an early hour?" Marcus had prepared a cover story. "I am researching security protocols from the past," he said smoothly. "Specifically, I am interested in the period 30 years ago, when Prince Edward was studying abroad. There were rumors of assassination attempts during that time, and I want to ensure we have learned from past mistakes." Brother Thomas nodded slowly, but Marcus noticed a flicker of something in his eyes. Was it fear? Recognition? The old monk stood and beckoned Marcus to follow him deeper into the archives. They walked through narrow corridors lined with books and scrolls, descending deeper underground. The temperature dropped with each step, and the air grew thick and musty. 30 years ago was a troubled time, Brother Thomas said quietly. The war with Valdoria had just ended. There was much distrust, many secrets. Prince Edward was young and impulsive. His father, the old king, sent him abroad, hoping he would mature and learn responsibility. They reached a section of the archives Marcus had never seen before. The old monk pulled out a heavy iron key and unlocked a reinforced door. Inside was a small room with just one table and a single shelf of documents. Brother Thomas selected 3 leather-bound journals and placed them on the table. "These are the private records of Queen Dowager Margaret," he explained. "She kept detailed diaries throughout her life. The journals from the period you are interested in are here. However, I must warn you, Captain. Some knowledge is dangerous. Some secrets were meant to stay buried." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The old monk knew something. Perhaps he had always known. Marcus opened the first journal and began to read. Queen Margaret's handwriting was elegant but hurried, as if she had been writing in distress. The entries from 30 years ago told a story that made Marcus's blood run cold. Prince Edward had indeed fallen in love while studying in the northern provinces. The girl's name was Isabella Thornwood, and she was beautiful, educated, and charming. Edward had been completely smitten with her. Despite his parents' objections, he had married her in secret, with only a village priest and 2 witnesses present. For 3 months they had lived as husband and wife in a small cottage outside the village. Then the truth had emerged. Isabella was not who she claimed to be. She was Lady Isabella Montrose, a noblewoman from Valdoria, sent specifically to seduce and marry the prince. The plan had been to infiltrate the royal family, gather intelligence, and eventually assassinate Edward once he became king. But something had gone wrong with the plan. Isabella had actually fallen in love with Edward. She had confessed everything to him, begging for his forgiveness. Edward had been devastated. He had wanted to turn Isabella over to the authorities, but she had revealed that she was pregnant with his child. She had pleaded for mercy, not for herself, but for their unborn baby. Edward had been torn between duty and love. In the end, with his mother's help, they had made a terrible decision. Isabella was given a new identity and hidden away in a remote monastery. She had given birth to a son, but she died shortly after from complications. The baby had been given to a childless couple in a distant village, with a generous sum of money to ensure he was well cared for. All records of the marriage had been destroyed, or so they thought. The priest who had performed the ceremony had been paid handsomely to keep silent and had supposedly left the country. Queen Margaret's final entry on the subject was chilling. She wrote that she had kept 1 copy of the marriage certificate and Isabella's ring, hidden in a box with protective symbols, in case the truth ever needed to be revealed. She had hoped it would never be necessary, but she could not bring herself to destroy the last proof of her grandson's existence. Marcus closed the journal, his hands trembling. So the son was real. There was a legitimate heir to the throne living somewhere in the kingdom, completely unaware of his true identity. But who had discovered this secret? Who was blackmailing? Lady Helena? And more importantly, what did they plan to do with this information? Brother Thomas had been watching Marcus read. Now he spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. You know the truth now, Captain. The question is, what will you do with it? Marcus looked at the old monk carefully. How long have you known about this? Since the day Queen Margaret gave me that box 20 years ago, Brother Thomas replied. She made me promise to keep it safe and to give it to Lady Helena when she died. I have kept that promise. But I always feared this day would come. Secrets this big never stay buried forever. Marcus stood abruptly. I need to know who else has access to these archives. Who has been researching the royal family's history in recent months? Brother Thomas pulled out a visitor log. The list was short. Most entries were from scholars researching topics unrelated to the royal family. But one name stood out. Lord Chancellor. Reginald Blackwood had visited the archives multiple times over the past 6 months. He had specifically requested documents related to Prince Edward's time abroad. Marcus's heart sank. Lord Blackwood was one of the most powerful men in the kingdom, second only to the king himself. He oversaw all legal matters, including the royal succession. If Blackwood knew about Edward's first marriage, he had the power to use that information to change the entire future of the kingdom. But why would he blackmail Lady Helena instead of going directly to the king? There was only one explanation. Blackwood was planning something bigger. He was not just interested in exposing the truth. He wanted to control what happened next. Perhaps he wanted to place Isabella's son on the throne, someone he could manipulate. Or perhaps he wanted to create enough chaos to seize power for himself during the crisis. Marcus thanked Brother Thomas and made the old monk promise not to tell anyone about his visit. As he climbed back up from the archives, his mind was already forming a plan. He needed to find Isabella's son before Blackwood did. He needed to warn Lady Helena that the threat was coming from inside the palace, and he needed to figure out if King Edward knew that his first wife had been a spy and that his first son was still alive. The palace was coming to life as servants prepared for the day. Marcus moved through the corridors with purpose, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He was so focused on his plans that he almost missed the figure watching him from a shadowy alcove. When he finally noticed and turned to look, the person had already disappeared. But Marcus had caught a glimpse of expensive silk robes and a distinctive ruby ring on the person's finger. Someone was following him, someone who wanted him to know he was being watched. The game had already begun, and Marcus realized he might already be several steps behind. He quickened his pace toward his quarters, checking over his shoulder constantly. When he finally reached his room and locked the door behind him, he found something that made his blood freeze. Sitting on his desk was a single white rose with a note tied to its stem. The rose was the symbol of Valdoria. The note contained just 3 words written in elegant handwriting. We know everything. Marcus crumpled the note in his fist. The enemies were not just inside the palace. They were inside his own quarters. They had been in his private space, touching his things, leaving their message. No one was safe. The conspiracy went deeper than he had imagined, and he was running out of time to stop it. Marcus stared at the white rose on his desk, his military training taking over his initial shock. He carefully examined the flower without touching it, looking for any poison or hidden devices. It appeared to be just an ordinary rose, but the message was clear. Someone knew he was investigating. Someone wanted to intimidate him. The question was whether they wanted to stop him or lead him somewhere. He burned the note in his fireplace and disposed of the rose carefully. Then he began checking his room for any signs of intrusion. Nothing else seemed disturbed, which meant the person who had entered was a professional. They had picked his lock without leaving scratches, moved through his space without knocking anything over, and left only what they wanted him to find. This level of skill suggested either a highly trained spy or someone from within the palace security itself. Marcus needed help, but he could trust no one in the palace. Then he remembered someone from his past, someone who owed him a life debt. Catherine Merrick had been his partner in the Royal Guard 10 years ago, before she left to start a private investigation business in the capital city. She was smart, resourceful, and most importantly, completely outside the palace's influence. Marcus wrote a coded message asking her to meet him at their old meeting spot, a small tavern on the outskirts of the city. As he prepared to leave the palace, Marcus was stopped by Lord Pemberton, his superior. The old man looked even more anxious than before. "Captain, a word please," Lord Pemberton said, pulling Marcus into an empty room. "I need to know what is going on. The Queen Consort requested your presence last night, and now I hear you were in the Royal Archives this morning. What are you investigating?" Marcus had to think quickly. Lord Pemberton was loyal, but he was also cautious and by the book. If Marcus told him the truth about the secret marriage, Pemberton would immediately inform the king, and everything would spin out of control before Marcus had a chance to understand the full situation. "Just routine security checks," Marcus lied smoothly. "Lady Helena was concerned about some old correspondence she found, and she wanted me to verify its authenticity. Nothing to worry about." Lord Pemberton did not look convinced, but he nodded slowly. "Be careful, Captain. There are rumors spreading through the palace. People are nervous, and when people are nervous, they make mistakes. I would hate for you to become a casualty of palace politics." After leaving Pemberton, Marcus made his way out of the palace through a side entrance used by servants. He changed into civilian clothes and took a roundabout route to the tavern, constantly checking to ensure he was not being followed. The tavern was exactly as he remembered it, dimly lit and filled with the smell of ale and wood smoke. Catherine was already there, sitting in their old corner booth. She looked different from how Marcus remembered. Her red hair was shorter, and there were lines around her eyes that had not been there before. But her green eyes were as sharp as ever, and she greeted him with a knowing smile. "Marcus," she said warmly, 10 years, and you finally reach out. This must be serious." Marcus sat down and quickly explained everything, speaking in low tones that would not carry beyond their booth. He told her about Lady Helena's midnight summons, the secret marriage, Isabella the spy, the hidden son, the blackmail letter, and Lord Blackwood's suspicious archive visits. With each revelation, Catherine's expression grew more serious. When Marcus finished, Catherine sat back and whistled softly. "You have stumbled into something much bigger than a simple succession scandal," she said. "If Isabella was really a Valdorian agent, then there is a good chance she was not working alone. Spies always have handlers, backup plans, and sleeper agents. After 30 years, those networks might still be active." "That is what I feared," Marcus admitted. "But there is more I have not told anyone. The ring in Lady Helena's box bears the Valdorian seal, yes, but it is not just any seal. It is the personal seal of the Valdorian royal family. Only someone with direct blood ties to their throne would possess such a ring." Catherine's eyes widened. "Are you saying Isabella was Valdorian royalty? That would make Edward's son not just an heir to our throne, but also potentially an heir to Valdoria's throne. This is not about succession anymore, Marcus. This is about a potential merger of two kingdoms, or worse, a takeover from within." They sat in silence for a moment, both understanding the magnitude of what they had uncovered. If Isabella's son discovered his true heritage, he could claim both thrones. The war between the two kingdoms might reignite, or alternatively, someone might try to unite both kingdoms under one ruler. Either scenario would change the political landscape of the entire continent. Catherine leaned forward. "I have contacts in the northern provinces where Isabella supposedly lived. Give me 2 days and I can find out if anyone remembers her or knows what happened to her son." "But Marcus, you need to understand something. If I start asking questions about this, people will notice. Dangerous people. Are you sure you want to go down this road?" Marcus thought of Lady Helena's frightened face, of Princess Charlotte who might lose her claim to the throne, of the entire kingdom potentially falling into chaos. "We do not have a choice," he said firmly. "Someone is already making moves. If we do not figure out what is happening, we will just be reacting to disasters instead of preventing them." Catherine nodded and stood to leave. "Stay at the palace," she instructed. "Keep your eyes open and try to find out what Lord Blackwood is planning. I will head north immediately and see what I can discover about Isabella's son. We will meet back here in 3 days with whatever we have learned." After Catherine left, Marcus sat alone for a while, thinking through everything he knew. There were still too many missing pieces. Who had sent the blackmail letter to Lady Helena? If it was Lord Blackwood, why threaten her instead of just exposing the truth? And who had broken into Marcus's quarters to leave the Valdorian Rose? Were there really still Valdorian agents operating inside the palace after all these years? Marcus returned to the palace as evening fell, slipping back in through the servants' entrance. He went straight to his quarters and was relieved to find no more unwanted gifts waiting for him. He changed back into his uniform and was about to head to his evening patrol when there was a sharp knock at his door. Marcus opened it to find a young page boy holding a sealed envelope. "For you, Captain," the boy said breathlessly, "from Princess Charlotte. She requests your immediate presence in the East Garden." Marcus's heart sank. Princess Charlotte, the King and Queen Consort's eldest daughter, was 18 years old and known for her intelligence and curiosity. If she was summoning him, it meant she had noticed something unusual going on. The last thing Marcus needed was a curious princess asking questions he could not answer. He found Princess Charlotte waiting by the fountain in the East Garden, her long dark hair braided elegantly and her blue eyes watching him carefully as he approached. She was not alone. Standing beside her was a young man Marcus did not recognize. He was tall with dark hair and startling blue eyes that seemed familiar somehow. "Captain Aldridge," Princess Charlotte said formally. "Thank you for coming. I need to introduce you to someone important. This is my friend Thomas Woodwright. He arrived at the palace today with a rather extraordinary story, and I thought you should hear it." The young man stepped forward, and Marcus noticed his nervous demeanor. When Thomas spoke, his voice was educated but held traces of a northern accent. "Captain, I know this will sound incredible, but I recently discovered something about my birth that I believe concerns the royal family. I was adopted as a baby by a couple in the northern provinces. They recently passed away, and while sorting through their belongings, I found documents suggesting that I am not who I thought I was." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. The timing could not be coincidental. "How did you meet the princess?" he asked carefully. Thomas glanced at Charlotte before answering. "I came to the palace 3 days ago hoping to speak with someone about my situation. Princess Charlotte overheard me arguing with the palace guards who would not let me in. She took pity on me and offered to hear my story. When I showed her the documents I had found, she realized this was too important to ignore." Princess Charlotte took over the explanation. "Captain, Thomas's documents suggest he might be the son of Prince Edward from a previous marriage. A marriage that occurred before my parents wed. If this is true, it means my siblings and I have no legal claim to the throne. Thomas would be the rightful heir." Marcus looked at Thomas Woodwright closely, really seeing him for the first time. The blue eyes were King Edward's eyes. The shape of his jaw, the way he held himself, even his gestures were eerily similar to the king. This was Isabella's son. The hidden prince had found his way to the palace on his own, at the exact same time that someone was blackmailing Lady Helena about his existence. It could not be a coincidence. Someone had led Thomas here. Someone wanted him to stake his claim at this precise moment. But who and why? "Princess Charlotte," Marcus said carefully. "Does anyone else know about Thomas's presence at the palace?" The princess shook her head. "Only my lady-in-waiting, and I swore her to secrecy. I wanted to speak with you first because I know you are loyal to my mother. Captain, I need to know the truth. Is Thomas really my half-brother? Does my father know about him?" Marcus looked at the young princess. Marcus led Princess Charlotte and Thomas to a secluded corner of the garden where they could not be overheard. The evening air was cool, and the only sounds were the fountain's gentle splash and the distant calls of night birds. Marcus knew he was taking a huge risk by revealing what he knew, but Princess Charlotte had already inserted herself into the situation, and leaving her ignorant would only put her in more danger. "Your mother came to me 3 nights ago," Marcus began, watching Princess Charlotte's reaction carefully. "She showed me documents that prove everything Thomas has told you is true. King Edward was married before, to a woman named Isabella Thornwood. Thomas is their son, and the legitimate heir to the throne. But there is more to this story than just succession rights." He explained about Isabella being a Valdorian spy, about the ring with the enemy kingdom's royal seal, about the blackmail letter Lady Helena had received, and about Lord Blackwood's suspicious interest in the archives. Thomas listened with growing shock, his face growing pale. Princess Charlotte remained composed, though Marcus could see her hands trembling slightly. "So my entire life has been a lie," Thomas said quietly when Marcus finished. "My parents, the people who raised me, they were paid to take me in. I am the son of a spy and a prince. What am I supposed to do with that information?" Princess Charlotte reached out and gently touched Thomas's arm. "You did not choose your birth parents any more than I chose mine," she said kindly. "What matters is what we do now. Captain Aldridge, what do you think is really happening here? Who brought Thomas to the palace at this exact moment?" Marcus had been pondering the same question. "The timing is too perfect to be accidental," he said. "Thomas, tell me exactly how. You found those documents, and what made you decide to come to the palace now?" Thomas took a deep breath. "My father, the man who raised me, died 6 months ago. My mother passed shortly after, I think from grief. While cleaning out their cottage, I found a locked box hidden beneath the floorboards in their bedroom. Inside were the documents about my birth, along with a letter my mother had written. She said a man in a dark cloak had come to their cottage 3 months ago asking questions about me. She was frightened and wanted me to know the truth in case something happened to them." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. A man in a dark cloak had questioned Thomas's parents 3 months ago. That was exactly when Lady Helena had discovered the wooden box from Queen Dowager Margaret. Someone had been systematically uncovering all the pieces of this secret at the same time. Someone was orchestrating everything like a master chess player, moving pieces into position. "The man who questioned your parents," Marcus asked urgently, "did your mother describe him in any way? Any distinguishing features?" Thomas nodded. "She wrote that he wore an expensive ruby ring and spoke with the accent of a high-born gentleman. He offered them gold to tell him about my childhood and about any unusual visitors they had received over the years. They refused the money and sent him away, but my mother was so frightened that she hid the documents and wrote me that letter." A ruby ring. Marcus remembered the figure he had glimpsed watching him in the palace corridor, the flash of red on their finger. Lord Blackwood was known for his collection of valuable rings. But would he be so obvious? Or was someone trying to point suspicion toward the Lord Chancellor while they worked from the shadows? Princess Charlotte spoke up. "Captain, there is something else you should know. 2 days ago I overheard Lord Blackwood arguing with someone in the throne room. I could not see who he was speaking with, but I heard him say something about correcting an old injustice and restoring proper order to the succession. At the time, I thought he was discussing some legal matter, but now I wonder if he was talking about Thomas." Marcus processed this new information. If Blackwood knew about Thomas and wanted to restore him to his rightful place in the succession, was the Lord Chancellor actually trying to do the right thing, or was there a darker motive behind his actions? Marcus thought back to the blackmail letter sent to Lady Helena. Whoever sent it had demanded gold, which suggested financial motivation rather than political idealism. "We need to find out what Blackwood is really planning," Marcus said, "and we need to do it quickly. Princess Charlotte, can you try to discover who Blackwood was arguing with in the throne room? Thomas, I need you to stay hidden in the palace. Do not let anyone except us know you are here. If the wrong people discover your presence, you could be in serious danger." Princess Charlotte agreed immediately, but Thomas looked troubled. "Captain, if I am truly the rightful heir, should I not present my case to King Edward? He is my father. Surely he deserves to know I exist and am alive." Marcus shook his head firmly. "We do not know how the king will react. According to the documents, he agreed to hide you away as a baby. He may have spent the last 28 years believing you were better off not knowing the truth. If you suddenly appear claiming the throne, it could force him into an impossible position. We need to understand the full situation before we bring this to the king." As they prepared to separate, Marcus heard footsteps approaching on the garden path. He quickly motioned for Princess Charlotte and Thomas to hide behind a large hedge, while he stepped forward to intercept whoever was coming. A figure emerged from the shadows, and Marcus's hand went to his sword hilt. Then he recognized the newcomer and relaxed slightly. It was Lady Helena. The queen consort looked even more distraught than she had 3 nights ago. Her hair was disheveled, and there were dark circles under her eyes. "Captain Aldridge," she said breathlessly. "Thank goodness I found you. Something terrible has happened. King Edward has fallen ill. The royal physician says he has been poisoned. Someone is trying to kill him. Marcus felt the pieces of the puzzle suddenly shifting into a new, darker pattern. If King Edward died before the truth about Thomas came out, the succession would automatically go to Princess Charlotte. But if the truth was revealed while the kingdom mourned its king, Thomas could claim the throne while everyone was vulnerable and confused. The timing would be perfect for whoever was orchestrating this conspiracy. "How long does the physician think the king has?" Marcus asked urgently. "Days, perhaps a week if we are lucky," Lady Helena said, tears streaming down her face. "They are doing everything they can, but the poison is rare and deadly. Captain, I am terrified. First the blackmail, now this. Someone is destroying my family." Princess Charlotte could not stay hidden any longer. She emerged from behind the hedge, her face pale with shock. "Mother, what is happening to father? Who would poison him?" Lady Helena looked startled to see her daughter. "Charlotte, what are you doing out here? And who is that with you?" Thomas stepped forward, and the resemblance to King Edward was unmistakable even in the dim evening light. Lady Helena gasped and took a step backward. "You," she whispered, "you are Isabella's son. How did you get here?" Before anyone could answer, a new voice rang out across the garden. How touching, a family reunion. Lord Blackwood emerged from the darkness, and he was not alone. With him were 6 armed guards, their swords drawn. "I have been watching you all for days, waiting for this moment. Thank you, Captain Aldridge, for bringing all the key players together in one convenient location." Marcus immediately moved to shield Princess Charlotte and Lady Helena, his own sword now drawn. "Blackwood, what is the meaning of this? You dare threaten the royal family?" Lord Blackwood laughed coldly. "Threaten them? I am saving this kingdom from decades of lies and corruption. King Edward broke sacred laws when he married Isabella, and then abandoned his responsibilities to his true son. He compounded that crime by marrying Lady Helena while his first wife still lived, making all their children illegitimate. The throne belongs to Thomas Woodwright, and I intend to see that justice is done." Thomas looked horrified. "I never asked for this. I did not come here to steal anyone's crown." Blackwood ignored him and continued. "I have been preparing for this moment for years. When I discovered the truth about Edward's first marriage in the archives, I realized I had the power to reshape the kingdom's future. I found Thomas and guided him here. I sent the blackmail letter to Lady Helena to keep her off balance. And yes, I poisoned King Edward. When he dies, the kingdom will be in chaos, and I will step forward with the proof of Thomas's legitimacy. As his loyal advisor and the one who restored him to his rightful place, I will have more power than any Lord Chancellor in history." "So this was all about your ambition," Marcus said, disgusted. "You would kill a king and tear apart a family just to increase your own power." Blackwood smiled. "I would prefer to think of it as correcting a historical injustice while simultaneously improving my position. Now, I am afraid I cannot let any of you leave this garden. You know too much, and I need to control the narrative when Edward's death is announced. Guards, seize them." The guards moved forward, but Marcus was ready. He had been counting them and assessing their positions while Blackwood talked. 6 against 1 were terrible odds, but Marcus had faced worse. More importantly, he was not alone. Princess Charlotte, despite her young age, had been trained in self-defense like all royal children. And Lady Helena, he suddenly remembered, had been a skilled horsewoman and archer in her youth before she married into the royal family. "On my signal, run for the East Wing," Marcus whispered. The palace physician worked quickly on Marcus's wounds while the chaos in the garden gradually settled. Lord Blackwood was taken to the dungeon, and his guards were disarmed and questioned. Catherine Merrick sat beside Marcus as his cuts were cleaned and bandaged, filling him in on what she had discovered in the northern provinces. "I found the monastery where Isabella stayed before she died," Catherine explained in a low voice. "The monks there kept excellent records. Isabella was indeed a Valdorian noblewoman, but what we did not know was that she was the younger sister of the current Valdorian king. That makes Thomas not just an heir to our throne, but also a potential claimant to Valdoria's throne through his mother's bloodline. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling overwhelmed. This situation was becoming more complicated by the moment. A man who could potentially unite two enemy kingdoms under one rule. That kind of power would attract all sorts of dangerous interest from people far beyond Lord Blackwood's ambitions. There is more, Catherine continued. According to the monks, Isabella left letters for her son. She wanted him to know the truth about both his parents, and to understand that she had truly loved Edward despite being sent to spy on him. The monks were supposed to give Thomas these letters when he turned 25, but someone got to them first. 3 months ago, a man matching Blackwood's description came to the monastery, paid the monks handsomely, and took all of Isabella's letters and personal belongings. So Blackwood had been planning this for months, Marcus said. He found the truth in the archives, tracked down Thomas, took Isabella's letters to use as leverage, and then set everything in motion. But poisoning the king seems extreme. Why not just reveal the truth and let the political pressure force Edward to acknowledge Thomas? Catherine shook her head. Because Edward is not as helpless as Blackwood assumed. If the king were healthy and strong, he could fight this revelation. He could claim the marriage was invalid, that Isabella lied about her identity, that the documents were forgeries. But with Edward dying of poison, the kingdom would be in turmoil. People would be more willing to accept a new king if the old one was already lost. Blackwood planned to position himself as the kingmaker, the one who found and elevated the true heir. Lord Pemberton approached them, his face grave. Captain Aldridge, Lady Catherine, the king wishes to speak with you both. He has been informed of the situation, and despite his condition, he insists on addressing this matter immediately. Marcus struggled to his feet, his bandaged wounds protesting. They made their way through the palace to the king's private chambers. The usually vibrant rooms were now darkened and quiet, with only a few candles providing light. King Edward lay in his bed, looking far older than his 50 years. His face was pale and drawn, and his breathing was labored, but his eyes were clear and focused. Lady Helena sat beside him, holding his hand. Princess Charlotte stood nearby with her younger siblings, all of them looking frightened and confused. Thomas Woodwright stood awkwardly in the corner, still unsure of his place in this royal drama. The king's gaze moved to Thomas and stayed there for a long moment. "Come closer," Edward said, his voice weak but firm. "Let me see you properly." Thomas approached the bed hesitantly. The king studied his face, and tears began to roll down Edward's cheeks. "You have your mother's eyes," he whispered. "I never thought I would see them again." "I am sorry, my son. I am so very sorry for the choices I made." The king gestured for everyone to come closer. "What I am about to say must be witnessed and remembered accurately," he began. 28 years ago, I made the worst mistake of my life. I fell in love with a beautiful woman who I later learned was a Valdorian spy. Despite knowing what she was, I loved her. When she became pregnant with our child, I faced an impossible choice. My father demanded I turn her over for execution as a traitor. My mother begged me to find another way. In the end, I chose cowardice. Edward paused, coughing weakly before continuing. I allowed my mother to hide Isabella away. I let them take my son and give him to strangers. I destroyed all records of our marriage and pretended it never happened. Then I married Helena, a good woman who deserved better than a husband living a lie. I gave her children who I knew might never have a legitimate claim to the throne if the truth ever emerged. I have been living in fear for almost 3 decades, waiting for this moment. Lady Helena squeezed her husband's hand. Edward, you did what you thought was right to protect the kingdom. The king shook his head weakly. I did what was easiest for me. I should have been honest from the start. Now, because of my cowardice, someone tried to use my past to murder me and seize power. Blackwood nearly succeeded in destroying everything. But perhaps this is the opportunity to finally set things right. Edward turned his gaze to Thomas. My son, I know I have no right to ask anything of you. I abandoned you before you were even born. But I need to tell you about your mother. Isabella was not simply a spy who betrayed her mission for love. She was a remarkable woman who believed that our 2 kingdoms should not be enemies. She saw our marriage as a chance for peace, a bridge between Valdoria and our kingdom. When she confessed her true identity to me, she begged me to use our love to end the centuries of war. I was too young and too frightened to see the wisdom in her words. Thomas spoke for the first time since entering the room. What are you saying? That you want me to claim the throne and somehow unite 2 enemy kingdoms? I am not a politician or a leader. I grew up as a carpenter's son. I know nothing about ruling. Edward smiled weakly. Neither did I when I was your age. But you have something I never had. You have the blood of both kingdoms in your veins. You have the right to stand before both thrones and speak with authority. The question is, what do you want to do with that right? Before Thomas could answer, the royal physician who had been hovering nearby spoke up urgently. Your Majesty, please conserve your strength. The poison is still in your system and we need to administer more treatment. Edward waved him away impatiently. I'm not dead yet, Doctor. Let me finish this conversation. He turned to Princess Charlotte. My dear daughter, you have always been wise beyond your years. What do you think we should do about this situation? Princess Charlotte had been listening quietly to everything. Now she stepped forward and spoke with surprising maturity. Father, I believe Thomas should be acknowledged as your son and given his rightful place in the succession. But I also believe we should not simply erase the last 28 years of family history. Mother and her children are not illegitimate. Your marriage to Mother was made in good faith, believing your first marriage had been properly dissolved. There must be a legal solution that honors everyone. Marcus was impressed by the princess's diplomatic approach. She was finding a middle path that might avoid civil war, while still acknowledging the truth. Lord Pemberton, who had been taking notes throughout the conversation, nodded approvingly. The king considered his daughter's words. You are right, as always. Thomas, I formally acknowledge you as my son and my eldest child, but I will not disinherit the children Helena gave me. Instead, I propose something that has never been done in our kingdom's history. Joint rule. When I die, you and Charlotte will reign together as king and queen. Not as husband and wife, but as brother and sister ruling in partnership. You will bring your Valdorian heritage and fresh perspective, while Charlotte brings her knowledge of our kingdom and its people. The room fell silent as everyone processed this unprecedented suggestion. A dual monarchy had never been attempted in their kingdom. It would require changes to centuries of law and tradition. But as Marcus looked around the room, he saw possibility in people's faces rather than rejection. Thomas finally spoke, his voice steady. If Princess Charlotte agrees, I will accept this responsibility. Not because I want power, but because it might be the way to honor both my parents and prevent future bloodshed. My mother died hoping for peace between kingdoms. Perhaps this is how we achieve her dream. Princess Charlotte walked over to Thomas and extended her hand. Then let us work together, brother. I know nothing of Valdoria, and you know nothing of ruling. We will both need to learn, but we can help each other. King Edward watched them clasp hands, and a peaceful expression settled over his face. Good, he said quietly. Now I can focus on getting well. Lord Pemberton, draft the necessary documents. Marcus, I owe you my life and my family's safety. Name your reward and it shall be granted. Marcus bowed respectfully. Your Majesty, I need no reward beyond seeing my kingdom safe. But I do have a request. Catherine Merrick, who helped uncover this conspiracy, deserves official recognition and perhaps a position in the Royal Intelligence Service. We will need people like her in the difficult days ahead. The king agreed immediately. As the meeting concluded and people began to leave, Lady Helena pulled Marcus aside. Captain, there is one thing that still troubles me. The blackmail letter I received, it demanded gold in exchange for silence. But Blackwood did not want money. He wanted power. So who sent me that letter? Marcus had been wondering the same thing. Catherine, who was standing nearby, spoke up. I may have an answer to that. While investigating in the north, I heard rumors of Valdorian agents still operating in our kingdom. Not soldiers or obvious spies, but merchants and travelers who gather information. 3 months had passed since that fateful night in the East Garden. King Edward had survived the poison, though his recovery was slow and he had aged considerably from the ordeal. Lord Blackwood had been tried for treason and conspiracy to murder. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment in the kingdom's most secure fortress. During his trial, he had remained defiant to the end, insisting he had only tried to restore proper order to the succession. Marcus stood on the palace balcony overlooking the capital city. Below, thousands of citizens had gathered for the historic ceremony that was about to take place. Today, King Edward would formally present both Thomas and Princess Charlotte as co-heirs to the throne. The announcement had been carefully prepared over the past 3 months, with the story being released gradually to give people time to adjust to the shocking revelation. The public reaction had been mixed, as expected. Many citizens were fascinated by the romantic tragedy of King Edward and Isabella's secret marriage. Others were outraged that the king had lied for so long. Religious leaders debated the legitimacy of Edward's marriage to Lady Helena. Political factions argued about whether joint rule could work or would lead to disaster. But gradually, as people learned more about Thomas and saw Princess Charlotte's grace in handling the situation, acceptance began to grow. Catherine Merrick joined Marcus on the balcony. She now wore the uniform of the newly created Royal Intelligence Service, a position King Edward had created specifically for her. "How are you feeling about today?" she asked. Marcus smiled slightly, nervous, hopeful, terrified, all of the above. "This is the biggest change our kingdom has seen in centuries. If it works, we could enter a new era of peace and prosperity. If it fails, we could have civil war." "It will work," Catherine said confidently. "I have been watching Thomas and Charlotte work together over these past months. They complement each other perfectly. Thomas brings fresh ideas and a connection to Valdoria that could open new trade opportunities. Charlotte brings wisdom and knowledge of how the kingdom functions. Together, they are stronger than either would be alone." Marcus nodded, remembering the many meetings he had attended where the two siblings had discussed policy and governance. What had started as a forced partnership had evolved into genuine friendship and mutual respect. Thomas had shown remarkable intelligence and a natural instinct for fairness. Charlotte had proven herself a skilled diplomat who could navigate the complex politics of the royal court while remaining true to her principles. The balcony door opened, and Lady Helena emerged. She looked elegant in her royal robes, though Marcus noticed the strain in her eyes. The past months had been difficult for her. She had faced harsh criticism from some quarters for her role in maintaining the deception, even though she had not known the full truth until recently. Her relationship with King Edward had been tested as they worked through years of secrets and half-truths. But they had emerged stronger, their love proven genuine despite the complicated circumstances of their marriage. Captain Aldridge, Lady Catherine, Lady Helena greeted them warmly. "Thank you both for everything you have done for my family. I do not think we could have survived this crisis without your loyalty and intelligence." Marcus bowed respectfully. "It was our duty and our honor, Your Majesty." Lady Helena moved to stand beside them, looking out over the crowd. "I received a letter this morning," she said quietly. "From Valdoria, from King Stefan, Isabella's brother. He has accepted our invitation to attend the coronation ceremony when the time comes. He wrote that his sister had always dreamed of peace between our kingdoms, and he wants to honor her memory by exploring diplomatic relations with us." Catherine and Marcus exchanged pleased looks. This was better than they had dared hope. If Valdoria was willing to negotiate peace, the entire political landscape of the continent would change. The two kingdoms had been enemies for so long that most people could not imagine any other relationship. But perhaps Isabella's son standing between two worlds could finally bridge the divide. The ceremonial trumpet sounded, signaling the start of the presentation. Marcus, Catherine, and Lady Helena made their way to their designated places in the grand hall. The room was filled with nobles, foreign ambassadors, religious leaders, and common citizens who had been chosen by lottery to witness this historic moment. Every seat was filled, and people stood along the walls, all eager to see the two heirs who would change their kingdom's future. King Edward entered first, walking slowly but with dignity. He had insisted on standing for the ceremony despite his physician's objections. Lady Helena moved to stand beside her husband, presenting a united front to the kingdom. Then Princess Charlotte entered, wearing a gown of royal blue embroidered with silver thread. She moved with confidence and grace, acknowledging the crowd with a warm smile that put people at ease. Finally, Thomas entered. He wore formal robes that had been specially designed to honor both his heritage and his new position. The fabric was the deep purple of their kingdom, but the embroidery incorporated the silver and white of Valdoria's royal colors. He looked nervous but determined, and Marcus noticed how he straightened his shoulders and lifted his chin as he walked toward the throne. Every inch a prince despite his humble upbringing, King Edward began to speak, his voice amplified by the hall's acoustics so everyone could hear. "Today marks a turning point in our kingdom's long history. For 28 years I have carried a burden of guilt and shame. I made choices as a young man that I thought would protect my kingdom, But instead I created a foundation of lies that nearly destroyed everything I love. Today, I seek to make amends for those mistakes and to build something better for the future." He gestured for Thomas to step forward. "This is my son, Thomas Edward Woodwright, born of my marriage to Lady Isabella Montrose of Valdoria. I abandoned him as an infant out of fear and pride. I denied him his birthright, his family, and his heritage. For this, I can only ask his forgiveness and vow to spend the rest of my days trying to make amends." Thomas looked at his father with compassion. "You did what you thought was necessary to protect your kingdom. I forgive you, and I hope we can build a relationship going forward, not just as king and heir, but as father and son." The crowd murmured appreciatively at this display of grace. King Edward then gestured for Princess Charlotte to join them. "This is my daughter, Charlotte Elizabeth, born of my marriage to Lady Helena. She is wise beyond her years, compassionate, and dedicated to the welfare of our people. She has handled the revelation of her brother's existence with remarkable maturity and has shown me what true nobility of character looks like." Princess Charlotte curtsied to her father before standing beside Thomas. "Together," Edward continued, "these two will lead our kingdom into a new era. I am establishing an unprecedented form of rule, a joint monarchy where both Thomas and Charlotte will share power equally. They will make decisions together, govern together, and present a united front to both our citizens and to the world beyond our borders." The king paused, letting the enormity of this announcement sink in. "I know this change will be difficult for many to accept. Our kingdom has always had a single ruler, a clear line of succession, but I believe this new approach is exactly what we need. Thomas brings connections to Valdoria, and a fresh perspective untainted by years of royal politics. Charlotte brings deep knowledge of our people and our traditions. Together they represent the best of both worlds." Lord Pemberton stepped forward carrying a velvet cushion with 2 identical crowns. These crowns had been commissioned specifically for this occasion, made from gold mined in both kingdoms and decorated with gems from both treasuries. They were smaller than the traditional king's crown, but no less magnificent, designed to be worn side by side rather than one above the other. "When I pass from this world," Edward said solemnly, "Thomas and Charlotte will both be crowned as equal rulers. They will have joint veto power over each other's decisions, forcing them to find compromise and consensus. They will alternate presiding over the royal council. They will together command the kingdom's military and represent us to foreign powers. This will not be easy, but I believe they are capable of making it work." The king then did something shocking. He removed his own crown and held it in his hands. "I am not abdicating today," he clarified, "but I am acknowledging that my time as sole ruler is coming to an end. When death claims me, this crown will be melted down and its materials will be divided between Thomas and Charlotte's crowns, symbolizing how my legacy lives on through both my children." Edward placed the crown on the cushion beside the 2 new crowns, then took Thomas's right hand and Charlotte's left hand and joined them together. "My children," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "promise me that you will always stand together. You will face opposition, doubt, and challenges that will test your resolve. But if you remain united, if you remember that your strength comes from your partnership, you can achieve things that no single ruler ever could." Thomas and Charlotte looked at each other, and Marcus saw genuine affection and commitment in their eyes. "We promise," they said in unison. The crowd erupted in applause. Not everyone was clapping, Marcus noticed. Some nobles looked skeptical or outright disapproving, but the majority of